I see a lot of times where growers will be very limited in who they're showing their product to, and almost in ignorance about what the size of the market is. That they think if they just show their local neighborhood wineries or contact them or make bulk wine and pass out a few samples to some people they know, that somehow it's going to sell itself. And the reality is that's not going to happen.
So hey everyone, this is Ankita, the head of events at Beverage Trade Network. This is brought to you by International Bulk Wine and Spirit Show, and the guest that we have today is Jeff Bitter. He's a president of Allied Grape Growers, a 500-member statewide grape growers cooperative marketing association. And it's lovely to have you and to understand the perspective. We are going to have this event right in July. So thank you so much, Jeff, to come on board.
Thank you. Proud to be here, and hopefully we can have a good discussion here.
Definitely. So why don't we start with your introduction and being a president at Allied Grape Growers, so we can call it AGG. So what does your role stands to? So I have been reading about you. I know you're fourth generation California grape grower, and you're born with a family with a vineyard operations. So I know where you come from, but how did you come up with the idea of AGG, and what is your role in it?
Well, actually, Allied Grape Growers was formed way back in 1951. So the company has been around almost 75 years. Next year, we'll celebrate our 75th birthday. It originally was formed because a group of growers were quite honestly kind of fed up with the waves up and down in the marketplace. And even back then, going back to, the mid 1900s, a lot of ups and downs in the marketplace, high prices one year, low prices the next. And a group of growers got together and said, we need to do something to provide some stability for our product in the marketplace. So they formed the co-op and partnered with gentlemen that had some wine production facilities and started making wine, and felt like they could take the ups and downs out of their business by getting into the wine business and being more vertically integrated. And so anyway, there's a long story that we don't have time for today, but today we have, almost 75 years later, we have morphed into what is now a marketing cooperative. So we don't own facilities any longer. We got rid of all those in the 1980s. Don't have any wine brands, but progressed on at that point as a marketing cooperative. So we're essentially a grape broker for our members. And we only work on our members' grapes for the most part. We do a little bit of non-member business, but most of what we do is marketing our members' grapes to various independent wineries throughout the state.
Amazing. So being a grape broker that you said, I'm sure your objective is how to increase the grape supply of your growers, your members, and to grow their profitability. So what exactly the role of Allied Grape Growers is when it comes to managing oversupply? Or we know that the market is a little bit volatile and there are market imbalances that comes. So how do you navigate through these changes?
Well, for the most part, our company has always had a focus on long-term relationships and therefore long-term contracts. And so we really try and focus on providing long-term stability for our grower members. I always tell people if they want the highest price every year, they can go get it themselves. That's not what we guarantee. It's not what we do. And it's kind of like trying to, play the stock market. If you're just always trying to get the highest returns, at some point you're going to get burned. And so we are more into longevity and long-term relationships and contracts. And we think that, the tortoise wins the race kind of a thing rather than the rabbit. So that's our general kind of approach to the market, because this is a long-term business, and it fits with the overall kind of characteristics of the wine business. It's a very long-term business. It's something where the players don't change often. Your grower community, your winery community is largely the same for many, many years. People do not enter and exit the business on a whim. And so that's just kind of how we approach it. And that's what we offer to our membership. Now, the reality is, we do go over and beyond just our services of what we have to offer to members by doing a lot of market research and information gathering with regard to supply, longer term trends, and what we see and how that matches up with demand. And we're pretty open in sharing that information, not just with our growers, but with the grower community in general, and also with the industry, because we believe that people can make better decisions if they have good information. And when others that you're in an industry with are making good decisions, it's good for everybody. It's not, it's a little bit of a, rising tide lifts all boats kind of a approach where, we could be secretive with information and try and use it to our advantage perhaps. But the reality is we think we do better off by informing and educating others so that they're not out there working against us in the marketplace, making silly decisions. So that's one of the things that we do kind of over and beyond just marketing grapes and bringing opportunities to growers.
Great. So I like the part where you said that information is something which is key, because we know the key members and the key players are going to be the same in bulk. And any business that happens in bulk is always a long term. It's comparatively, it goes for years and years of contracts. So I think information plays a very vital role. So if the questions can be turned around from a grower's perspective, so if you have the right information and right data, so what are the market signals that you should watch to decide as a grower whether I should expand, whether I should maintain, whether I should reduce my vineyard acreage? What are the things that you guide your growers to keep a watch and make sure that these are your criterias?
Well, on a very broad sense, I would say the grower community needs to be very in tune with what the headwinds and tailwinds are of demand, on the demand side, because ultimately we're growing a product for consumers that we want them to pull the product through the system. We don't want to push our product through the system. So we have to be paying attention to what they want and what longer term trends are. And currently, it's very well known that there's more headwinds than tailwinds right now in that
Yes.
arena.
Yes.
The last 3 years have been very difficult in the wine business for numerous reasons, and we've done a lot of talking about that as an industry. There's some things that we can respond to in a quicker fashion than others, but the reality is growers need to understand what are the longer term implications and the trends so that they make good decisions and planting and removals and expansion or contraction. Because the reality is, as we've already talked about, this is a long-term business. If you're going to make a decision to invest in a vineyard, you're doing that for a 25 to 35-year commitment. So it really is important to understand, like, where do you think you're going to be in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years on this important investment? And, of course, on the more molecular level, if you will, growers should probably pay attention to the spot market signals. The spot market is largely, I would say, kind of an exaggeration sometimes of the broader, longer term market. So when things are short and the spot market gets exciting and kind of healthy, a lot of times it's probably a little stronger than what the longer term focus is. And same thing with when it goes the other way, like right now when there's no spot market. It's a very quiet time. You
Mm.
have very high inventories historically of bulk wine and grapes available. And again, I think that's an exaggeration of what the longer term situation is in our industry right now. And so it's important to pay attention to the spot market, but it's also very important to realize that that's a here and now measurement, and that just because it's, poor today doesn't mean it's going to be poor tomorrow. And it's important to understand those longer term implications and try to make decisions based on that. Now, with regard to expanding acreage, I said this once before, but because it's so expensive to get into vineyards and it's such a long
Yes.
process in terms of putting money in and growing, there you're going to want to look for the signals from the buyers that they are short from a long-term perspective, and that's going to be signaled by them offering planting contracts. That they think that they're going to need a product going well into the future, whether it's a decade or more, and they're willing to offer a contract for a grower to go develop that for them. And so my point is that if that's not happening, then I would probably be hesitant to speculate on, investing in a vineyard. I mean, unless you just really like to gamble,
Yes, that's
because, today's development costs so much money.
right.
It's a big risk to go out there and develop acreage without some type of solid information that product's going to be in demand in the future.
True. Do you see a lot of growers coming up? I mean, do you see a lot of investment which is happening? So we know that the wine is going pretty slow. So do you see people still investing and coming up with bulk supply?
Well, there's certainly a huge amount of inventory available right now in grapes and wine. The reality is that there's kind of a liquidation process going on right now where many folks are trying to get out from under inventory of grapes and bulk wine. So there's lots of vineyards for sale. There's actually lots of wineries for sale
Yeah,
in the marketplace right now. And it's a matter of kind of finding that equilibrium of where those potential purchases make sense. And common problem I see is that when a vineyard or a winery goes up for sale, or if you have grapes or wine for sale, there's still sellers out there that think that the price is what it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it's not. So those products, whether it's vineyard, wineries, wine, or grapes, they just sit on the market with
correct.
with no activity. And
Bias.
so that's kind of where we're at today in the cycle. There's a lot for sale and there's not a lot of buyers because there's a big difference between the expectations of value between those two parties.
What is the best way that, according to you, any grower can position their bulk supply, or let's say their grapes, to get more buyers?
Well, essentially it all starts with quality, and that's coupled with exposure. So it's kind of a two-pronged approach to being successful. But it is absolutely necessary in this type of market where we have an oversupply that your quality is above average. If you're at average or below, um, you just
It's
really
hard.
don't stand much chance.
Correct.
Yeah. And so that's the first thing is maintaining quality. And that's difficult because in times like this where there is no guarantee for sales and the pricing is weak, it's harder to spend that money to make that quality product. You're looking for ways to cut costs and cut corners perhaps. And
Correct.
so maintaining that quality is crucial. But the other thing is exposure. It doesn't do any good to grow grapes or put bulk wine into the bulk market without putting it in front of people and having a mechanism for exposure. And so, like with our growers, they have us. We are able to touch hundreds of buyers that they would, each individual grower would not be able to touch on their own, perhaps. So that's very important. And then again, once you're out there in the bulk market, you've got to have a way to get those samples out to be effective in getting them in front of the potential buyers, and usually that's the broker network. It's important to do that. I see a lot of times where growers will be very limited in who they're showing their product to and almost in ignorance about what the size of the market is, that they think if they just show their local neighborhood wineries or contact them or make bulk wine and pass out a few samples to some people they know, that somehow it's going to sell itself. And the reality is
No,
that's not going to
exactly.
happen.
So you rightly said, I think the rising cost, the labor, or whatever we say, I think that makes the growers also think a little bit to compromise on the quality. But coming back to AGG, so how do you help growers to navigate in terms of not to compromise on quality, handle the price volatility as well, and how to deal with these market fluctuations? So you've been helping them as a broker. What other resources do you provide them, just to in terms of understanding, education, as you said, information? So if you can just list down a couple of.
So those things are exactly right. The services we provide are obviously over and beyond what they would be able to do on their own, but we have a full-time field staff year-round that is actually trained viticulturists in the field,
Nice.
working with our growers. So they are information sharing in that arena as well. The information we share isn't always limited to market information. It's also can include, what neighboring growers are doing and doing effectively. And so we share that information amongst our membership. When it comes to programs, we do have a bulk wine program that we administer for our membership, which allows our members to make wine out of their grapes without having any licenses or really even any resources, because the way the program is structured, it all runs through us. We have a facility we contract with, we have winemaking protocol that's all in place, and we have all the licenses to be able to store and sell the wine. So our growers have very quick and easy access to the bulk market if they need to extend their marketability beyond just the harvest. And we've seen that in very many years over, recent time, where it's it's not just about, selling the grapes at harvest. Sometimes it's about extending that marketability beyond that so that you have an opportunity to move the product. There's a lot of buyers in the bulk market that don't exist in the grape market. So if you have something that is attractive as a product, but the buyers that would potentially buy it don't buy as grapes, they only buy as wine, then you want to figure out a way to get it in front of those buyers. And so those are things that we kind of help with in terms of extending that marketability for our growers.
So, for example, there are a lot of other things which are happening in wine industry. We are talking about sustainability a lot. We are talking about low and no alcohol. So, how does that has affected, let's say, the demand of certain varietals or the growing practices or the future course of actions of growers?
There's a few different ways to kind of look at those opportunities. Some growers are able to transition into those opportunities if
Hmm.
they have the right varieties or the right vineyard setup in order to go to like organic, for example. We have had a number of growers who have transitioned out of red grapes and into white grapes,
Wow.
sometimes under contract, where there's been grafting contracts offered to switch over. So the winery that's buying doesn't want to buy red anymore, but wants white grapes. So we make that transition for them. So there's definitely some opportunities out there. It's one of those things though, where you have to be careful as a grower, because you don't want to lean in too hard, too fast in a segment of the market that may be growing, but also could just be pipeline filling. And
Right.
so
Right.
we kind of saw that with rosé a little bit. There was a lot of excitement around rosé a few years ago, and some folks leaned into that pretty hard. And a couple of years after that, there's a flood of rosé on the market, and it's not moving. So you
Right.
got to be careful about how hard you lean into certain trends. But I can definitely say, we've seen, as you kind of mentioned, organic, sustainable, lower alcohol wines, all of those things, white wines instead of red.
Hmm.
There's definitely some relative strengths in the marketplace that I think where it's appropriate for growers to move in that direction, they should consider it.
How can bulk wine sellers better anticipate the shifts which are going to happen in market demand?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because the bulk market is really, as I've heard it referred to, and I like the way it's referred to, as a pressure relief valve kind of for
Mhm.
the wine industry, where, when we are long on inventory, wineries are long, they go to the bulk market to try and liquidate, get out from under that
Right.
inventory.
Excess. Hmm.
And so the issue we've had the last 2 or 3 years is that your traditional buyers of bulk wine have actually become sellers in many cases. And so it's hard to anticipate when and to what degree that's going to happen. But it's certainly upon us right now, and it remains upon us. And so we are hearing and experiencing bulk wine inventories much higher than they've been in years. When it gets to the position that we're in, it's a very clear signal that growers should not just automatically make wine when they can't sell the grapes. If there's already difficulty selling, and then you have a bulk market that's oversupplied where buyers have become sellers, that's probably a pretty clear signal that, you don't want to get into the bathtub with all those folks.
Right.
It's just, it's going to spill over the edge. And so the reality is we can watch the signals in the market to see when things start to move, but we also have to remember that the bulk market in total, when we talk about the California bulk wine market, it's generally referenced to be around 25 million gallons, plus or minus. I think that Ciotti's most recent number was closer to 40 million gallons of available wine. But even at that, you're only talking about single-digit percentage of the whole crush. So the
Right.
entire
Hmm.
crush in California, even at 3 million gallons, is the bulk market is still only fractional in terms of the size of the California industry, the California crush. And I think it's important to kind of keep that in mind too, that
Right.
it goes back to what we talked about the spot market, where it's an indicator of the direction right now and how things are currently, but it's not a strong indicator of what the long-term trends are. So it's a matter of making decisions accordingly when it comes to deciding what am I going to do with my crop today. If I can't sell it, am I going to put it up in bulk? And what does it mean if I can't sell it in the bulk market for a year or two? And in times like this, where you've had an excess supply for some time, let's just say 2 years plus, sometimes it takes a while to clear out, but when it does, then things start to move again. And like we saw in 2020, we had the wildfires of 2020, and that actually spurred the bulk market very quickly to clean up real nice. And it was very long on inventory until those fires broke out. So you
Right.
just never know what's going to happen that's going to change
True.
a market that is only single-digit percentage of your entire industry.
For bulk wine sellers, what can be the right USP? What can make their product differentiate and more in demand, especially when they have so many competition around them? So what sort of USPs do you see in the success story? So you said that we have successful bulk wine sellers as well. So what are the key couple of things that you have seen that makes a product more successful?
Well, again, it all comes down to exposure and attractiveness in my mind. It's the same as, what we talked before. You've got to stand apart in the crowd. I think for us, and I'll just give you kind of an anecdotal example, we made bulk wine in 2024, just like we have every year for decades. But what we did different last year was we chose to only make wine from the most desired appellations in California. So where we would normally make some wine out of the Central Valley or North Valley and just kind of your generic coastal regions, we focused our entire bulk wine production last year on Napa Valley, areas of, sub-appellations of Sonoma County, and other areas where we thought that there was a particular opportunity to move the product based on appellation instead of varietal. And again, that's just a function of where we're at in the market. If we're in a position where we're so terribly oversupplied, then what's going to happen is you're going to have buyers that come into the market that are going to try and pick off the most desirable items first at the lowest price. And that might mean, a Napa Valley Cabernet or a Dry
Right.
Creek Zinfandel or Russian River Valley Pinot Noir Chardonnay. So those are the types of wines we put into the market last year.
So we have kind of deviated and changed our bulk wine and spirit show theme, and we have changed it to what are the new economics of supply chain tariffs and consumer shift, because we have been seeing a lot of questions that are being asked by our suppliers and the people who are attending as an exhibitor to bulk wine. So what, according to you, should be the right key takeaway or insight from any grape grower who is going to attend IBWSS? What do you want them to learn or be witness to the discussions that are going to happen?
That's a great question. I think, in attending this show or any show or opportunity to learn and network, you're going to look for those opportunities for credible forecasting, credible estimates, credible trend analysis. And it's important for growers to pay attention to those things because, again, like we've talked, they're making long-term decisions. This is a long-term business. So you really want to be in tune with what's happening beyond today. We all know what's happening today. I can get up and give a talk about the market, and I'm not going to surprise anybody with what's happening today. They know, they read it in the
Oh,
news, they see it all
yes,
around them.
yes,
What
agreed.
people want to know is, what are the long-term trends? What do today's facts tell us about what's likely in the future? So as a grower attending IBWSS, I would definitely look for those opportunities to glean information about the longer term trends in the industry and where we should be investing our time and money and resources.